guys, welcome to another video. This is kind of a follow-up with a video I made a few days ago, which was a podcast form, and I said that technology and tech design has become stagnant. And now what I meant with that is with the modern phones. It started with a semi-modern the earlier days, more modern after 2012, and with a modern up to 2020s and after, which we all know how that went. If you take a look at them, they start with, as you see, a really beautiful design. Neo loved it on the Matrix movie. This is not exactly the banana that we used to call it, but it's a precursor of that, or a follow-up, whatever you want to call that. From the 90s, this one I think was released in 97 if I'm not wrong. The battery still works. One thing that is worth noticing in my opinion, and as you see, it's fully working. But it went from this and spawned to a lot of these here. And for example, Samsung followed with one of these in the early 2000s. I'm not sure if it has battery, but as you see, the shape is similar, but it's not the same. They kept doing things just a little bit slightly different to make different variations in design. And yes, if you talk about how they kind of chased each other's tail like the modern ones, I would agree. If you see the shapes, especially on these ones here, for example, they were quite similar. The T9 keyboard was quite interesting, and then followed by the QWERTY keyboard with Samsung. Motorola had a version, and of course the pioneer of it, BlackBerry itself, which was quite a beautiful design, this older one. Yes, it had no camera, but they still had differences in the design. If you see here on the chin, there is a hole here for a lanyard, and the wheel here, that is how you scroll through the menu and the options. That's a wheel that you can press it as well. And here's the button on the side. And the power button was on the top, of course. I'm not sure if it has battery because I didn't really charge them in a long time. Then we come to the 2000s. That becomes a whole web. Well, except these here. In 2000s, what we saw, or 2010, I would say more precisely, we saw the big rise on the sliders. And this one is an LG that's beat up, but this is what a slider was. That reveals the keyboard. Some of them had a camera here instead of here. And this was the phone that a lot of people liked. And what I liked about them is that you can fit them in one hand, and actually they fit in your pocket. They fit in the pocket. Who knew, right? In the 2000s, we recognize one of the bigger players, Nokia, that came with a system far before Android and iOS were recognized by anyone. iOS probably was not even a thing. Android was just starting to touch the waters. Before that was a different system. It was called Symbian. This one has the S60. Well, was updated, and then they came with a Nokia 6600 that had a revised version of the Symbian. Then they came with different Nokias up to the started with a Windows operating system in it, and that was it for Nokia. It took a deep dive, and it never really came back. I haven't noticed them come back. Well, in those same years, we noticed another one. Yes, Motorola did a version of this spinny phone. They did a touch version, newer, of course. This one was Nokia's version of it. Yes, that is a hole. If you were wondering what that is, you would flip it like that. It had a mirror here on the side that you could take a selfie or use it for makeup. And yes, this one featured a micro SD and micro USB charger. So this was a different spin, and no pun intended here, that is a spin. Then we had on the more executive style phones that still some people would use it, probably not here in America because here I'm not sure if we have the 3G network or 2G network anymore for them. It was the Nokia, we used to call it the Nokia Business. These phones were so widespread and so everywhere that if you had one of these, it was assumed you were a business person. And let me just go to the ringtones real quick, just to remind myself how beautiful this stuff actually was. Customized, ringtones, Nokia Tune. Let me put it by my microphone. That is one of the more executive style phones that in that time, as I said, if you had one of them, you were seen as a business person. Not everybody had one of them. Then we come to the flip phones. Well, yes, they chased each other's tail. If you see here, there is one theme in common with all these 5 that I have featured here. I have more, but I don't want to take the whole table again. These 5 here versus these 5 here. Now there's differences, obviously, in design. Some of them had antennas. Then Samsung, for example, upgraded to no antenna. As you see, they're quite similar, but one is earlier. And as you see, there's no camera on it anywhere. This is the earlier version. And then the updated version without antenna had a camera on the back right here. But both featured the screen on top of the lid, which you see across all of them with a screen on top of the lid. And that was a feature that most of them had. If it, this one, we assumed it was a very old phone and was kind of obsolete. But then we get to Motorola, which you've seen the Motorola, the new Razr. This was the OG Razr. Well, these two here that started that whole thing, especially this one, the V6. This one is the culprit for the new Motorola Razr, the foldable. This is the predecessor of that Motorola, just in case you did not know that fact. And obviously for Samsung, there's so many Samsung flips that there's nothing new on them. As you see here, I have 3 Samsung flips that are right here, and the 4th is right here. And before that, going back to Motorola again, Motorola had this one here that featured a push to talk. It would become almost like a walkie-talkie, I would say, for the time at least. That you click the button here on the side and the phone would flip open, and you had the talk button right here. I'm not sure if you can hear the click. Let me put it next to my microphone. You probably cannot hear it, but it had it. Yes, it had micro SD, had buttons on top. It was a beautiful phone. It had a spring-loaded screen, and if you paired it with 2, yes, I have the other one too. You paired the 2 together and you could use them almost like walkie-talkie. But yes, it was with subscription, and yes, it was the time that, you know, Nextel was still around. By the way, for the younger audience here, Nextel was an actual company just like T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T. Now gone for good. Not sure if I'm that sad that it's gone. And then we have the 2 from the most prestigious companies of the time making kind of the out-of-the-line things. Nokia, yes, it came on a flip style phone, but look at the size of that screen. This was amongst the first to actually feature such a huge screen on top of the lid. The screen right here is only half the size of the screen that's inside. And to us back then was actually crazy that a flip phone had such a big screen. Then you had LG with a mirroring finish style that you couldn't see the screen unless the phone was on. Then yes, but if you see, the lid goes on the back side of the phone, not just on the front. And as you see, it becomes just one cube. And that was differences between them, although not maybe huge and as much as you might think, but there were differences on their designs, which I much appreciated. And I still appreciate actually have differences and try to make things different. Then from these here, we go to the kind of more modern era that we enter now this side of the table. But before we enter completely here, I want to touch again on these 2 that were kind of the pioneers of why you still have that touch keyboard today, the QWERTY keyboard. It started with these guys right here. They featured the very first QWERTY keyboards back then. Then we entered the first iPhones, which are the OGs of the time. And now, from this point forward, everything will be the same, except for the very first few years. The first few years, yes, the iPhone came this way. Motorola had a Droid here, which looks similar to everything else, right? Except around the bezel, there's actual metal that's kind of brushed metal. On the back, it featured almost like a plate, but it was rubberized piece that made that design very slick. And as you see, it is not the same thickness from top to bottom. It was thicker here, and thinner on the bottom. Yes, this phone now, it might be obsolete for today's standards. If you see on all the side, if the camera will focus for us, had actual screws. And I thought this was one of the great phones, and this is not old. I'm putting it here, but it's actually not as old as these two. It was just after the iPhone 4, which now we enter an era where phones start to resemble each other. From this point forward, now we have every single company doing the exact same design. Starting from the low ZTEs that were the cheapo ones that sometimes, I'm not sure if they would include them with a McDonald's food. Then we go to Motos that had a cheaper E4. Then from this one we had the Droid that a lot of people know this one. It's one of the Moto Droid Z something, Z920 I think if I'm not wrong. It was quite premium. Then you had the other Moto, was not as expensive, but it was very premium material. This is not what you would think. This one now started just to follow the old with non-removable battery. And let me show you in a second right here what I mean with non-removable battery. Here on the corner, you'll have to be careful taking that out. You take this piece, and here's you have your memory card, your SIM card, and there is nothing else here. Here's the SIM card that the IMEI. This one just comes out, pulls a piece of paper, and you put it back in. But no removable battery. Yes, you could dismantle the whole phone. Really was not that big of a deal, but not as easy as it used to be just before this one. And from this point forward, all of them became the exact same. Now, Sony was, this one when it first came had full 4K. It was a great phone. I cannot say bad words for the time being, the Xperia Z2, but non-removable battery. As you see here, here's your micro SD, here would be your SIM card, your charge port, and here's the accessories that you would buy from Sony. And yes, I put this sticker because I broke the back, of course. It featured 4K camera and slow motion and all that good stuff, which for the time this one came out, no other phone was actually doing it the same way as Sony was doing it. So big up to them. Then after that we enter the modern or latest years of the phones. We start from the very cheapo ones, which was this Motorola right here. It featured what looks like it's two cameras, but it's not. One is a camera, one is some kind of IR, whatever you want to call that, and the flash. Now this one is just the same shape as all of them, which, let's go to the next less expensive one, for example, would be a Samsung A32. As you see right here, this is a Samsung A32. Yes, I still use it. And then we go to Motorola G Stylus, which is a really good phone when it comes to battery and network. And the back features the same exact camera, so I'll show you in a second. And yes, that's the Note 20 that I broke, the Note 20 Ultra. And the back is the same. Now, let me show you something from three phones that are supposed to be that different. Well, except for the shape, what else do you notice they're being the same? Well, the cameras. They're all doing the same exact design. They don't want to put their cameras anywhere else but where everybody else does them. Yes, I know they talk about space saving and all that, but where did the innovation go? That is my question. Where did the innovation go? Why aren't they making the modern phones, but with different shapes like the old phones used to do them? Look at that. Tell me if a company like Samsung or Motorola or even Nokia themselves came up with an Android, let's say they made all the Snapdragon and all that in a form like that, and you could just fold it like this. How many people would buy it? I would probably buy one. Not that it's exactly my style, but I would buy it just for the hell of it. Because it looks cool. It's some different design. Just imagine now if you could still buy a phone today, like this one here, that you can actually fit in your pocket. Look at that. Look at the size between this one and my Note 20 Ultra. It just looks like they're not even the same company. And they're both Samsung. It's just mind-boggling to me that companies are not innovating. And yes, I would shift the blame to the mother of all dysfunctional designs. Yes, you want to chew me about it? Go ahead on the comments below. It's fine. I'm ready for comments. I blame Apple. They came up first with locked phones that you cannot repair, you can do nothing with them. When it dies, it just dies and goes to hell. And yes, you want to preserve the environment, make it repairable, make the battery replaceable, and don't give me, I'm a tech guy, don't give me the excuse of batteries being dangerous just because this battery is 4,000 milliamps, which is 4 amps. The connection inside is still a clip-on connection. It's not one solid bar from the cells to the board. So that excuse falls apart. And protecting the environment, seriously, how many people are collecting them like me? Probably none. Or unless you're talking about Michael Fisher, the Mr.Mobile, I applaud him. I respect that guy because he does a really great job showcasing different designs and phones from different eras. And I just wish I had his patience probably, but how many of these have sold throughout the years, you think? I would say millions. How many of them are still in use? Maybe less than 1%. And the ones in use are to collectors like me, Michael Fisher, and others that collect them. For no reason, just for own nostalgia, or comparison to new ones, or to show you guys that were born past 2000 that probably don't even know about them because you were babies, and I don't fault you for it. You were not born in this side that you kind of actually saw differences between companies, so you are only used with this side here, and to you it looks just normal. Yes, Apple changed from this phone to this one right here, almost nothing, but they sold you a new phone. Or Motorola, from Razr Droid, this one here to this one here, what did they change? Nothing, but they sold you a new phone. And so on and so forth. It gets a little bit sad to see companies tell us that they're doing it for us. That's the biggest joke, I would say, in modern times. There's no such thing as companies doing it for us. If they did it for us, there would be something like this that, I don't know, flips, something that slides, and something that opens, and spring load closes and opens and all that good stuff. And I forgot to mention these three for a good reason, because they're kind of irrelevant. Even though these are modern flip phones by any standard and means, these are modern flip phones. Yes, with a ZTE, for example. It features supposedly 4G, and you can still buy them. They're, I think, $60 or $50. They still work with various carriers. Here's the other one. Yes, it's a Samsung from Boost Mobile. I don't have Boost, but I used to at some point just for testing. And there was the rugged Samsung flip phone. It was built almost like a tank, and it did exactly how you would expect a rugged phone to do. It had a huge speaker here, huge screen on top. You had to unscrew this here to open the lid. And yes, the batteries are replaceable in all three of them. And actually, they work really good if you are looking to disconnect from the modern era of destruction and all that stuff, distraction. And yes, I meant distraction, not destruction, but ironically, right? No pun intended. Well, I just hope you enjoyed this video in some sense of the word enjoyment, and I hope you got a glimpse of the back information of what I meant on my podcast, that the new tech is becoming stagnant. They're not advancing, they're not doing anything new, they're all chasing each other's tail. And sadly, you can start from here. Boom. As you see, if you make a snake right here, the differences are just made it bigger. Oh yeah, I made it wider, but the design remains exactly the same as the first iPhone that started the trend of no repairs. And I just have to say thank you for watching this video. I hope you'll hit like and subscribe. And with that said, we will see you next time. Bye!